Hello everyone, thank you for joining me. I'm Andrew Daly, and today I'm delighted to say that I'm being joined by Dave Bush. Dave is someone I know from around the Procure Tech conference scene for a few years now, and he's now working with a business called Sligo. Dave, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thanks, Andrew. Good to see you.
So Dave, as I say, you're sort of a Procure Tech veteran, if you don't mind me saying that. So perhaps tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit about your own background, if you don't mind, please.
Sure, no problem. So go back quite a ways, way before AI was even a thing in this industry. So in 2000, I was co-founder and then CEO of a e-sourcing company called Iasta that was in business for 15 years. We grew to be in the top 5 of the sourcing world at that time. We merged with another company called Determine, which was NASDAQ traded. And I was chief revenue officer there for almost 3 years. I left that company and joined Spend HQ afterwards, and was chief revenue officer there for almost 5 years. And then now for the last couple of years, been here with Sligo.
Indeed, and so you've seen so much of the evolution in technology in our marketplace, and you must be excited about the sort of what's coming with AI, particularly with you joining Sligo. So, can you tell us a little bit about what the business does? What is it unique about Sligo that will interest procurement leaders?
Yeah, so basically, this is an Agentic AI platform, and it's built in a way that is completely unique to anything available in the industry. And we're really getting a lot of traction with very large companies who are seeing that these complex use cases, there's very few ways to solve for them outside of agentic. And what Sligo does is it builds custom solutions effectively to address every company's unique situations. So a little bit different than a traditional software company from that standpoint. It's not install and then follow the blueprint of how the software has been designed. It's all bespoke to the organization and solves very large enterprise issues.
Right. Okay. And one of those issues is, I think, around the administration, because so many procurement teams are sort of buried in admin around compliance checks, supply risk assessment and reporting. So from your perspective, what's the sort of scale of the problem today, and why is that so hard to fix for procurement leaders?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of stats out there that are continuing to be developed from ourselves and other sources, but really there's a huge hidden time waste inside procurement, the enterprise procurement organization. What we see is about 60% of procurement time allocation is to tactical work, essentially becoming what we call human APIs. And that's a huge majority of what's going on out there as opposed to strategic work. There's almost 50%, or about 47% annual increase in volume. And on average use cases, 7 or more disconnected systems that are, causing some of the problem. As far as, why it's been hard to fix, there's traditional solutions are basically digitizing broken processes rather than reconstructing them. So there's an integration. The integration gap is structural from that standpoint. Technology investments have created complex spirals of technology. Legacy architecture then is compounding that problem. And essentially, the wrong problem has been framed up, up until now. So the industry has been focused on automating individual tasks rather than addressing fundamental orchestration challenge. So that's that kind of like tells you why things are so difficult and why they have a lot of there's so many efficiency issues. But the problem is getting worse. It's not better. There's millions and millions of dollars invested in procurement technology in different organizations, but companies and individuals aren't getting much better off. It's adding more complexity and more manual coordination, and that human cost is massive, and it's referred to externally as like quiet cracking. So we see high employee disengagement when these professionals are spending so much time doing tactical data movement and administration, as opposed to strategic impact on how their day should be organized. So the bottom line is that the problem isn't technology or effort. It's applying these antiquated approaches to modern challenges. So it's not more automation, it's better automation with orchestration and having intelligent agents that can eliminate manual work.
Yeah, indeed. I think that's where a lot of the excitement is around agentic, isn't it? And this whole series that I'm recording is about demystifying what that means for people who have a non-technical mindset. So you mentioned Sligo is an agentic platform. So that's Agentic AI for procurement. What does that mean in practical terms for people that don't quite understand what this whole landscape's about, Dave?
Yeah, exactly, Andrew. There's a lot of information out there, some of it correct, some of it not. But at the end of the day, agentic is it's not software that you need to manage. It involves multi-agent collaboration or multi-agent clusters. Agents make decisions. They're not following scripts, and they're context aware, and have that intelligence that's context aware. So combining an internal knowledge base and a shared state context history. So those kind of things create a totally different solution set than traditional software or even traditional automation.
Yeah.
A difference from what you would think of as automation is, the traditional thinking or the traditional way things work, whether it's RPA or just general automation, is going to be following predefined paths. So, if an invoice is over $10,000, routed to the manager, so like a rules-based execution. Yeah. Those type of, you're also going to have more hard-coded things, point-to-point integrations, yeah, rigid workflows. Ultimately, those will break when exceptions are thrown at it. So scenarios outside the scripts are going to require human intervention, which is kind of, that's not the point really for automation, is to get back involved from a human standpoint. So from our position, in our approach, we try to, have the agents have goal-driven reasoning and ensure this purchase complies with all policies, as an example. Agents will figure that out instead of you having to hard code where it goes. Our platform can handle complexity, dynamic complexity. So they will adapt to new situations. It doesn't need to be reprogrammed. They're all, they're very human-like in that way. It's not a structured process. These agents, they're going to navigate between systems to accomplish their objectives, which is really true orchestration. Mm-hmm. And they adapt their intelligence, as I mentioned, from that context and shared state. So they learn and adjust and approach based on the outcomes that are needed. And then, they're ultimately, the agents are becoming the orchestrators so that humans can set the strategy, and agentic AI or agents can handle all the execution work. Kind of gets back to the first question on all the inefficiency, all the admin work that goes on in procurement right now. Let the agents do that and be focused more on strategic work. So, the traditional automation, it basically is, think of it as making trains running faster on the existing tracks. Whereas agentic AI, done correctly, is building intelligent systems that essentially create their own routes, right? And they're moving around, finding the shortest path to the end goal. So agents will adapt and solve for issues. And then all procurement teams need to do is speak or type their intent into the prompt, and the agent should handle everything. That's what we would consider true agentic AI, not just really automation with a lot of marketing.
Yeah, indeed. And I think that's one thing which a lot of people who don't truly understand agentic yet are struggling to differentiate between that and traditional RPA and automation. It's that dynamic learning that's at the heart of it, isn't it, really? And the ability to allow it to make some decisions, albeit within an agreed set of parameters. Right, great. I think that's something which a lot of people will really value, that explanation. So, we should touch on the admin a couple of times now. Could you perhaps share any examples of where your platform has cut cycle times or improved outcomes, maybe on supplier onboardings, risk checks, sourcing, those sort of, time-consuming tasks that every procurement department's got to face?
Yeah, no problem. Well, I think I'll kind of start answering that question by saying I meet with CPOs all the time, heads of COEs, procurement COEs, and digital transformation people. I get this question a lot, which is, what are the most common use cases? And the answer is really that every organization is so radically different from one another. They're all sort of like a snowflake. And so there isn't a cookie cutter answer to this. However, you do see some themes, right? Like in one particular example, a lot of this comes around supplier data and a supplier risk assessment in one particular use case where 3 weeks average cycle time to go from vendor award into vendor contracting with all the different issues that have to be addressed as far as InfoSec and due diligence and different risks that need to be gone through with the supplier assessment before they go to legal. And so things like that, where we've built multi-agent clusters. They have specialized roles, like an extractor, a collector, an inspector, delegator, auditor, all of these going through like a sequenced process. And the agents are going to have their own roles and do exactly what they're programmed to do. So, extracting proposal data, assessing dynamic risk criteria, lots of if-thens, right? So in this process, if a certain response is answered one way, then it gets a different set of questions. This way it gets other questions. And so having these agents route all this information correctly based on all these if-thens with all these thousands of potential scenarios that could come out of it and identify and deliver the end result, which, is the final risk assessment. And then the supervisor agent orchestrates everything on the back end, making sure the right agents are accessing the right things and documenting everything as it goes. So in that particular case, that's a 3-week process that has been condensed down to 2 or 3 minutes, where, it's just amazing efficiency gains there, where you can take just very, very tactical data collection and data assessments and then, that are very quantifiable, and then, produce a result from there. Another example, with the combination of like contracts and invoices and matching those up, we have a client where the invoices, and this is, I'm sure every company can relate to this, invoices need to be reconciled to the current contracts. The contracts have the MSA could have multiple addendums over multiple years, and those could be residing in different systems. This contract data, like I said, it could be in multiple CLMs, it could be in SharePoint, OneDrive, G Drive, whatever, but it's all over the place. And then there's, at the end of the day, it's manual cross-referencing to ensure the correct billing that has come in is accurate to the contract terms before it goes to payment. So there's a lot of payments that are going out that are not coordinated with the proper contract terms or the proper addendum. Cases like that, a cluster of agents, 5, 6, where they're coordinating that entire process, reading those contracts, making sure the most accurate, most current contract is what's being used. And then comparing it, reading the invoice as well as reading the contract, making virtually instantaneous comparisons, and doing it in what we would say is an ambient environment, so an ambient agent. So when it comes in, it's automatically triggered to do this, and then it escalates all the all the failures, basically. So did this invoice pass or did it fail? Where did it fail? What line items? All those sorts of things. Huge reduction in the amount of time it takes, which is generally, for, I would say 15 minutes to an hour per contract, per invoice that has to be manually sifted through. That can be reduced 90+%. So that's another kind of interesting example. There's obviously many more. There is no limitation to what you can do from a use case perspective. We see strategic sourcing come into play often, where you can reduce the sourcing cycle time by weeks and weeks and weeks by, just automating market intelligence, supplier research, contract analysis, spend data, of course, and be able to create custom RFPs and data collection based on the policies and procedures of the organization, the accurate information that's inside the organization from, like I said, the contract data, the spend data, the market intelligence, the supplier and vendor information, all that sort of thing, to create a sourcing project in extremely fast turnaround time compared to traditional. And then ultimately, if it was desired, that can reside in a platform like Sligo, and you could use it, export it to Word or Excel, or it could be pushed over into a third-party sourcing platform that could accept it, Workday, Ariba, Archlet, whatever, and just take all that information that's been custom generated, push it right into an e-sourcing application to go to market. So tons of examples like that.
Remarkable, really. It's just remarkable, the power of it, isn't it? And listening to you, Dave, as a recruiter who's been involved in moving people around organisations in procurement for the vast majority of my career, I think about the misconception that some people have got that, one agent is going to come along and replace them as a human being doing that job. But you talk about clusters of agents and the fact that they're doing very specific and often very tightly defined parts of quite a substantial process. So actually, it's not about one agent coming on and replacing it. It's about, the human orchestrating those clusters of agents, as you talk about. And we'll touch on that, I think, in a few moments when we talk to you about the skills. But before we get to that point,
I'll just add one thing to that, Andrew. When we first started kind of thinking about this and the go-to-market, the assumption was that everyone was going to say, we want to reduce headcount, reduce our internal costs. That has not at all been the situation. It has been to supplement and to enhance what the current team can do, because frankly, they're underwater and they are mired in administrative work instead of strategic work. And so, this whole ethos of what we're trying to do isn't about removing jobs or removing headcount. It's about making more efficient the team that exists with the data that exists, and ultimately getting more spend under management strategically. Yeah,
indeed. And I ran or co-ran a workshop at an event in London last week with SAP Ariba, and it was called Future Purchasing, a respected consultancy here in the UK. And I ran the skills and talent bit of the workshop. And I said to people, don't think of it as artificial intelligence from your own perspective. Think of it in terms of augmented intelligence, to help you do your role better. And you could see a few people thinking, oh, right, I've not thought of that, And so I think when you start to position it as helping people do the job better and more strategically, that's when you remove some of the fear and, quite frankly, you create some excitement about, what is going to be possible. And this is just the start of it, isn't it, really? That's the both scary and exciting bit, I think, depending on your perspective. But exactly. One of the things I think is another sort of misconception that perhaps exists in the market is, for people who've got existing tech stacks, procurement tech stacks, obviously you've got a lot of history in the marketplace, a lot of knowledge, that do procurement leaders worry about if they're going to rip and replace existing systems? I think you can explain how Sligo integrates with existing tools while keeping their data secure, and so it can be a very effective add-on to what they've already got. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, that is one of the core tenets of what we were trying to build. And, when we had seen so many technology failures, implementation failures, and friction inside the organization, all sorts of things. So yeah, you're spot on, Andrew. So, from an integration philosophy standpoint, what we believe is we meet you where you are. So not a rip and replace, zero rip and replace is required. This is, what we think of as like connective tissue. It's not another software on an island or something like that. It's also not a huge technical lift. So all of what we're doing, and I think this is what makes Sligo incredibly unique, especially in procurement, where I've never seen anything else do this, is we work with the existing procurement stack and the ERPs and whatever internal tools are going to be the data sources for the particular use cases, and that's where we pull the information and what the agents are accessing. So on top of it, from a security standpoint, this is all inside your network and your control. There's flexible deployment models. We do have kind of a SaaS type of solution, which is more traditional. But when companies get very large inside Fortune 500, at a minimum, the concept of having this all running inside the firewall is much more appealing to them.
Yeah.
They have the capabilities from an IT standpoint and DevOps to manage this. They have the existing infrastructure with the data and the LLMs and that sort of thing. And then, of course, Sligo, we do all this behind the firewall, and then we have our own enterprise grade certifications, all the, the security docs that would also be needed. So that takes a lot of pressure off the conflict or the collaboration, however you want to look at it, between IT or CISO and the procurement teams, because you're no longer, that data is not moving outside of the firewall. So that creates an inherently more secure situation. From our standpoint, all the systems stay. The ERP stays, the procurement tech stack stay, the contract management systems, whatever it is that's in play, that all stays where it is. We work within those tools or across those tools. Our goal is to fix what's broken, the manual coordination, the data reconciliation, all of those things, human API, human bridges, whatever you want to call them, those should really melt away as more and more use cases get built out, and then do that all behind your firewall.
Yeah, indeed. And I think that, again, is something which is a source of concern to people who perhaps don't understand the complexities of how these things are done. And so, that must be something which, when you're talking to customers, you're really able to reassure them about that particularly important factor. So as we move into this new era, Dave, you've got AI agents doing all the heavy lifting, able to take away a lot of this time-consuming administrative and process-focused work for procurement professionals. I think for me, that means from a skills perspective, we're going to see some traditional procurement skills become much more important. And I think critical and strategic thinking are two examples of that. But we've also got new skills coming in. So one is obviously orchestration of these clusters that you're talking about. Another is, I think I would describe it as digital commercial acumen, which is understanding the impact of your investments in tech on the bigger organization beyond just the value from procurement, but the actual wider organization. Would you agree they're two really important new skills? Would you highlight any other new skills that you think procurement professionals will need to develop in order to thrive in this new era?
Yeah, I mean, it's a brave new world, right? So I guess it goes without saying, talk to Andrew and Simon at Edbury Daily. Go to your workshops. We use your networks.
Checks in the post, Dave. Checks in the post.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, let me start by going back to your question. And there are definitely things that you can see happening right now, which are skills that will become obsolete or just not really that important, moving forward. So start there, which is Excel mastery, and just having tons of spreadsheets and all these crazy formulas and all that kind of thing. Agents can take all that work off of you. The UI fatigue and all these multiple platforms and system navigation. You could have a dozen or more different systems that people have to go into, memorizing policies and referring back to documents as far as purchasing policies and procedures. That's completely unnecessary. All of that goes into knowledge bases, and the agents know all that, and they have the most accurate, most up-to-date information. Manual reporting, any reporting that you need is going to be automated. Insights that are generated in real time that can be done in this process. And then a lot of these vendor portals, right, which I've dealt with numerous of them as far as like supplier onboarding, and some of them are easy and some of them are horrible, and just not having letting agents navigate a lot of that. So, those are some things that probably become less and less important. But, for people who are thinking about AI and agentic as part of their future career, it's a new paradigm. It's more about a philosophical thinking for yourself, and understanding the why behind procurement strategies is more important than because agents are are handling the how, right? So the how becomes not the goal anymore. It's the why and how to improve things, and that gets into creative problem solving and framing. We see this being much more of an intellectual exercise at looking at the totality of everything in the organization and identifying the biggest challenges, the biggest inefficiencies, and then making sure that that data is there and those connections can be made so that agents can solve for that. And at the individual level as well, I think some of the short-term priorities for anybody in procurement should be just to get a good handle on an understanding of what AI and agentic capabilities and limitations are, with the asterisks on that, because it's literally changing day by day. Yeah. I mean, things just are moving so fast in this area of technology and how it applies to procurement. But just staying up to date and abreast with the technology, reading articles, of people that can be trusted sources, I think is very valuable. Learning to define outcomes as opposed to just scripting out processes. So really thinking of the solution as opposed to the formula to get there. And then looking for gaps inside your organization where data readiness is going to be an issue. So where there's missing data or incomplete data, aged data, that kind of thing, that makes agentic less valuable. And having that core framework of good information that agents can access to use for their responses is obviously a big deal. So knowing where those gaps are in your organization so that you can close those gaps is important in the short term. Longer term, I mean, getting more familiar with context engineering and what that means as far as yourself and your vendors and how that can impact your organization. That definitely kind of coincides with multi-agent orchestration. Those things help identify use cases and think through your internal problems, so that like what would all these agents do and how would we build the context engineering to do that. We obviously Sligo, we are doing that, but I think our more progressive customers are learning how to do that as well, and they're becoming innovation catalysts, where they're bringing to us really interesting situations once they kind of get the understanding going. And down the road, I think people are going to be managing like a combination of AI and human teams. And so how do you manage agents and how do you control them like a performance review or something, right? Of a agent, a bot. But yeah, ultimately it's about driving transformation in the organization.
Absolutely, yeah, and this is, I mean, a number of very, very good points there, Dave. Thank you very much. I mean, that managing those agents, I like to think of it in terms of collaborating with them as colleagues rather than thinking of them as software or tools. But you mentioned a few things there that really made me think about some of the work we've been doing around skills for this new era. And so I mentioned critical thinking earlier. So you talked in that that part about things like reporting and compliance, and that the agents can do a lot of that for you. And I think okay, so that's it's less important to have that skill set specifically now. On the flip side, you've got a lot of experienced people who feel threatened by this, about they're not ready necessarily to embrace this new area of technology. But what a lot of experienced people don't realize is that their experience and their knowledge is of great value in how you interact and collaborate with the particularly generative AI platforms, and also in that critical thinking. So when you've got outputs from the agents, we know that it's not going to be absolutely perfect for quite some time yet. So the ability to evaluate and assess and make judgments based on the outputs when you think, hang on, this might not be completely accurate, or they may have missed something, or something's changed in a policy, whatever it may be. And I think a lot of more experienced practitioners, perhaps of our sort of age group, Dave, should be reassured that actually their experience is going to be really, really valuable when working with AI tools, because that critical thing is there. Because I think a lot of people think, oh, the young ones, Gen Z, my daughter's graduated this year, they've got it with the phone in their hand, they're much more minded to use these tools more effectively, but actually they haven't yet got the work experience that we've all got that will really underpin that vital, critical, and then strategic thinking as well. So I think from a skills perspective, it's a really interesting landscape. But I mean, more experienced practitioners should be throwing themselves in, learning what can be done. And that other point you make about context engineering, people think, well, what's that? Well, if people will still talk about prompt engineering, but if you're really on top of developments in AI, you'll realize the importance of thinking of it in terms of context rather than prompts now, as something which I've learned a lot about that from a guy called Jeremy Utley, who teaches AI at Stanford. His videos are brilliant, and that's something I've really been looking at recently. Anyway, there we go. So we're going to see each other next week at Amsterdam, one of my favourite weeks of the year, DPW. Can't wait for that. So with that in mind, we'll both be there, and because we go to lots of other events. You'll meet, I'm sure, quite a lot of procurement leaders next week. Dave will want to know more about how they get started with AI agents. Can you recommend a first step for anybody who's not going to have the privilege of being with us in Amsterdam next week?
Oh yeah, that would be a shame if they're not. But there's some things that I see that are working very, very well. For starters, we do a 8 to 12 week assessment, depending on the situation, with different organizations. And this goes, for companies that are the biggest in the world, still get tremendous value out of a 12-week assessment to really determine what, how Agentic AI can benefit your organization. Looking at your tech stack, your data, your talent readiness, your strategic vision and goals, putting all these different pieces together, then starts to really coalesce into what these use cases, the best use cases are to address. So going through an assessment process and really understanding what you need to build before you start, getting all your tools out and to build them. But that assessment, I think, is one of the best things you can do, whether with Sligo or internally or whatever, but, really framing the battlefield and having a good understanding of where you should be going, what direction you should be pointed, as far as how Agentic can help you. Additionally, just like anything else, you need to build a coalition internally before you start jumping into all kinds of different technology. I see important stakeholders, obviously, in InfoSec and digital transformation. Most companies have something around that, especially on digital transformation. Everyone has InfoSec, but getting those people aligned with what procurement's trying to accomplish from an agentic standpoint inside the organization. There's typically going to be some sort of procurement pioneer, I guess, or just someone who's very enthusiastic about it, and having that internal support team that wants to use this type of stuff to solve problems. And then, of course, this obviously goes for anything as long as I've been around, but, getting that executive air cover, and making sure, a lot of organizations we talk to, there's actually either a board or a CEO directive to aggressively find solutions in agentic AI. And so you kind of already have that in place, but just identifying and mapping who those people are, whether it's obviously a CPO or a CFO, CEO, that kind of thing, who wants these kind of things happening. Or once I talked to a client, a prospect, in London, and they have a directive on 30% reduction of cost by 2026. Wow. So it's, you can't do that without taking some pretty radical measures. And just making sure that those executives are on board with this and, supporting it. more recommendation, I think, would be to focus on reconstruction and not so much on automation, but how you orchestrate all these kind of things and do it in a systematic and scalable way. And then, I've worked with procurement executives for 25 years, and ROI, demonstrable ROI, it always comes back. You can never get away from it. And so baselining, as these use cases start getting designed or identified, and then agentic solutions get designed, having the baseline early is very good, because then you can measure it and track it. And that's also good for, before you even start on this, seeing what the amount of time is that's being wasted on certain processes and all of those kind of things, where you can then do projections and forecasts on how much of this can we take out of the system, how much of this manual work can we take out of the system, and then how does that create a dollar value in addition, to the organization from resources being able to do other things and the amount of time being taken and that sort of thing. It's you can calculate all that. So I'm big on that. I mean, even if the CEO says they want to do it, right, you still need to be prepared to say, yes, this initiative will be able to save us a minimum of this because we're doing that, right? So, I guess just to kind of tie that all together, I like to see people come to us where, they see where the pain is the greatest, so that we can collectively prove the most value the fastest, and then expand that strategically into more and more use cases. We've seen multiple clients go from 3, 4, 5 use cases to 100 in 90 days, 180 days. I mean, it just mushrooms into this huge amount of opportunity. So it's the agents can fix these issues. The impact can be measured, and that's how do you get to a successful transformation. And this is one of those seminal moments where the risk really is not in moving forward with an agentic strategy. The risk is sitting on the sidelines while other companies are doing it and figuring it out and leveraging the value, because they're the ones that are going to be the market leaders 12 to 18 months from now and setting all the industry standards. Whereas the organizations that are just kind of sitting back, watching, seeing what might develop or whatever, they're missing a very fast moving train. And so there's that has to be part of the calculus, I think.
Absolutely. Well. And I think, as an extension to my world, it's going to be the same with the people as well. The best people will gravitate to those organizations that are getting started, doing exciting things, exploring, innovating, maybe sometimes even failing, but failing quickly and learning and moving on. Whereas those that are sort of stuck on the sidelines, they will lose their best people to the other organizations. Dave, that's been absolutely wonderful, really informative for our audience. That I'm very, very grateful for that. So if people want to explore some of the things that you've been talking about today, particularly that 12-week assessment, what's the best way to contact you?
My email address is david@sligo.ai.
Yeah.
Right there. And
on brand there, I see, and you can get on LinkedIn, I'm sure, as well.
Exactly. That's probably the easiest way, or LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn.
So I'll see you next week. Let's hope for 2 good results on Sunday. So by the time I see you, my Seahawks and your Colts will both be 4-1, yeah?
Exactly. Maybe. Yep. That's that sounds like a plan so far. Going well this year.
I'll see you next week, Dave. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Andrew. Great. I really enjoyed it.